Speaker. I rise today, and I'm very excited to rise today on a topic that I know a lot about and have worked in. So I rise to address the House today regarding the important amendments to the Northern Territory Education Act. These amendments are designed to consolidate powers and functions associated with the enrolment and attendance, providing much needed clarity and efficiency in our education system. So I just wanted to start to remind those opposite of a few things that I think they may have forgotten about over the last 8 years or so. So number one is absolutely that the right to education is recognised in key international agreements and national laws. There's the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and Article 26 states that everyone has the right to an education. There's the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. Articles 28 and 29 establish that all children have the right to a free primary education and that education should develop their abilities, respect for human rights, and prepare them for a responsible life in society. And number three is the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. Article 13 says it affirms the right of everyone to education and progressive introduction of a free secondary and progressive introduction of a free secondary and higher education. Now, we also have our own Northern Territory laws. So here we've got the Education Act, and the legislation does state that it is compulsory for kids between the age of 6 and 17 to attend school every day, unless they're enrolled or attending another alternative eligible option. So Section 40 of the Education Act is about compulsory attendance, and it details information around what kids need to be doing, what parents need to be doing. Parents that have daily care and control of a child need to be ensuring that kids are attending school. We have attendance officers in the Department of Education that go out and talk to families about their child's attendance. They're not going out and walking up to the door and issuing an infringement notice. They're having a conversation. So if you're preparing your speech right now saying that people are going out and just handing out fines willy-nilly, they're not. It's an absolute shame to think that our attendance officers that work in schools, in the department, in the public service would just walk out and give a fine to somebody because their kid's not attending school. It's an absolute mistruth. These hard-working attendance officers are working with families to remove barriers. They're going out, talking to families, identifying barriers, trying to support in the removal of those barriers, and then supporting that re-engagement in school. It's absolute essential work that is involved, and I've done this work. So in 2012, I moved into a role of the manager of the attendance and truancy team down in Alice Springs in Central Australia. I had staff and we travelled around Central Australia working with families to try and improve attendance. It was hard work, but we did not go out and issue fines unless we had absolutely no reason not to issue a fine. If a family was talking about sorry business, if a family was talking about cultural business, there are absolute reasons why people don't attend school. And the Department of Education supports those reasons. There are many, many families that don't have a reason for not sending their kids to school. They simply refuse to send their kids to school. The member for Guadra was talking about Gumbalanya School, how they have alternative term dates, alternative school start times. The attendance in that community is still low. He's talking about things that he doesn't have any contextual information around. We are doing things to actually make sure that there's changes in place to support different ways of working. It's not always working. There are things that do work and there are things that don't. So the Education Act has different powers for attendance officers to be able to go out and work with families. They can issue directions to enrol because, believe it or not, there's a lot of kids that aren't even enrolled in a school in the Northern Territory. So you can work with a family to get a child enrolled. They can issue information notices, go and have a chat to the family, say, we need to have a conversation about this. They can issue compulsory conference notices, so they all meet at the school and they try and remove those barriers. They work with the school, with the attendance officers and with the family to try and re-engage that child in school. There's compliance notices if that doesn't work. We can issue a compliance notice, say, hey, we're implementing these things, you're not putting in the effort, here's your compliance notice. Then there's infringement notices, then there's prosecution. I have done all of these things and worked with so many families across the Territory to try and re-engage kids in school. I've issued infringement notices. I was responsible for the delivery of prosecution against not sending your kids to school in the Northern Territory. It worked. And you know what? The outcome in court was not infringement notices. So I like that you're saying shame across the chamber there, but it worked, and kids' attendance improved from around 20% to around 80% with the appropriate case management. So I'd like you to say shame. Attendance under your government did not rise at all. It went backwards.
Shame. That is a big shame.
I was also down in Alice Springs when they rolled out what the member for Gwadja talked about was the school enrolment and attendance measure, SEAM. That project also worked. Do you know what? The implementation was flawed. There was rules and requirements in the implementation of the school enrolment and attendance measure that meant that that program failed. I worked with many, many, many families where their attendance improved dramatically if their Centrelink payments had been stopped. And you know what? When kids went back to school, their money got reinstated. There was consequences for people's actions, and people understood that. What happened was parents would go into Centrelink, and the social workers that worked in Centrelink would turn their payments back on. So if a family if their money was suspended for, say, 9 weeks, for example, and a family went into Centrelink and the social worker went, oh, we're going to turn their money back on, even though the child hasn't re-engaged, they would get their money turned back on, but they would also get 9 weeks' worth of back pay. What happens when a family receives 9 weeks' worth of back pay plus the additional Centrelink payments? That child's not going to school from there on in. You can absolutely guarantee that that money's not going to be spent on a child. So the system was flawed, the implementation was flawed. Absolutely flawed. I saw it, I lived it, I worked it, and I dealt with those families in a couple of weeks' time trying to go back through the same process again. So I absolutely know, understand, and have been brought through this system. When I went through the prosecution process with families, the re-engagement level was huge. I undertook over 80 prosecutions of people from all different locations around the Territory and different races. And I had a lot of success with all of those families. It's all about the implementation of the process, the program, and the delivery and the case management. That's what's going to support our programs in the Northern Territory. The Labor government over the last 8 years did not implement and case manage these families appropriately. It did not happen. But I can tell you, proper implementation and proper case management will work and will support these families. And that's what our school attendance officers are going to be doing. It's what they are doing. I was hearing the member for Nightcliff talk about whether or not anybody has gone out and spoken to people about this process. And I can tell her that I have spoken to many, many people over the years.
Member for Fanny Bay, could you take a seat, please, and can we stop the clock? Honourable members, as you know, we've had 3 new acting deputy speakers appointed, and I'm now inviting the member for Blaine to take over the session. Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Be gentle, it's my first time. Member for Fanny Bay, please continue the clock.
Thank you, Acting Deputy Speaker. Welcome. So I'll just continue. What I was saying was I have absolutely spoken to people on the ground. I've spoken to workers, I've spoken to teachers over time and time again. What they want is to be able to do their job. In my maiden speech in Parliament, I talked about the need to reduce red tape. Over the last 8 years, teachers have been required to be absolutely everything to everybody. They're required to be disciplinarians, teachers, counsellors, youth workers. They're supposed to go out and pick kids up, drop them off. They're supposed to be lifeguards. They're supposed to be absolutely everything to everybody. They are teachers, and their job is in a classroom to educate our children. We need other people working with these families to make sure that we can support that re-engagement in school. I've lived and breathed this work for a very, very long time now, and I absolutely support what's happening here today. We've talked about, the member for Gwadja talked about cultural learning, on country learning. As I can say again, these attendance officers will not go out to families and just issue fines. They are working with the families and identifying barriers. I'll say it again and again and again. So please, if in your speech you are aiming to say that you think that they're walking out and just giving fines left, right and centre, they are absolutely not. They are working with families, they are mediating, and they are making sure that they try their best to remove any barriers that the family identifies to get that child back to school. These proposed amendments will absolutely streamline processes related to enrolment and attendance. The powers and functions will reduce bureaucratic hurdles and enhance the overall efficiency in our schools. I know that I worked in that space. Authorised officers were responsible for doing these jobs, and that meant that we had to go out and get, what did we get? Instruments. So the Office of Parliamentary Counsel had to draft instruments for authorised officers to be able to go out and do this work. We're removing that barrier so that the attendance officers actually can go do this work without having to have that additional burden. There's going to be clarity on the issuing of notices. So the process of issuing these notices under the Act, it will ensure that all stakeholders, including schools, parents and students, have a clear understanding of the procedures that are involved. We're already doing that through our media that we're sending out. Families know that they have to send their kids to school, and they can work with the school attendance officers to try and get to school. I please will bring everybody back to those rights of a child in getting a school education. It is absolutely everybody's right to get a school education, and this work will absolutely support. The National School Identifier absolutely has been on the ball for a very, very long time, and I can't wait for 2027 when that comes into play. Kids that transition across borders will be able to be followed. Their details will be able to transition between Queensland and Northern Territory and Northern Territory and South Australia down in the Pitjantjatjara lands. Absolutely is going to be a game changer for schools in the Territory. So finally, I think I've spoken enough, and I think I've given my passion for this work. It is absolutely not about all punitive measures. The casework that goes into this work is absolutely amazing. I absolutely send all of my best wishes to the attendance officers that work so hard across the Territory. They travel remote, they're in and out, they're working with families, they're butting their heads against a brick wall a lot of the time. But there are successes, and we will push and push and push to get this right for families and for the children. As I said in my speech earlier around housing, everything, absolutely everything comes back to education. Whether it's education about washing your hands, whether it's education about learning to be respectful and polite, whether it's learning how to clean up after yourself, absolutely everything comes back to education. And every child in the Northern Territory has a right to be educated. Here in the Territory, we've got amazing teachers, amazing schools, and I absolutely support this. So, Acting Deputy Speaker, I'll just finish up by saying that these amendments reflect our commitment to improving educational outcomes. They address enrolment and attendance challenges comprehensively, and they balance enforcement with practical support, ensuring every child in the Northern Territory has access to consistent schooling opportunities. I commend these reforms to the House and urge my colleagues across the chamber to support them. Thank you.
Thank you, Member for Fanny Bay.